Good evening, everybody. Thank you all for coming to the Free Speech Alliance's Free Speech Speaker Series featuring Kenny Zhu. Kenny's presentation this evening is titled "Never Apologize for Being Colorblind: A Defense of Colorblind and Merit-Based Policies," and we're incredibly grateful to him for taking time out of his schedule to come speak to us. While this event is hosted by the Davidson College Free Speech Alliance, it is made possible entirely through the generous support of Davidsonians for Freedom of Thought and Discourse, particularly John Craig, Kevin Cook, and Savannah Damon. We're thankful for their support, and we look forward to continuing our relationship with them. We'd also like to acknowledge Nancy Murray, who's the widow of Rob Murray, who was Davidson class of 1978, who was a founding member of DFTE, and through his support, much of this is possible. So Nancy, thank you so much for joining us this evening. The mission of the Davidson College Free Speech Alliance is to help ensure a learning environment at Davidson College that is ideologically balanced and that promotes a lively and fearless freedom of debate and deliberation. As part of that mission, the Free Speech Alliance is committed to fostering civil discourse surrounding relevant perspectives that are often treated uncivilly at institutions of higher education. That is exactly what we're doing here today as we welcome Kenny Zhu to our campus. Kenny is a member of the Davidson College class of 2019, and he serves as president of Color Us United, a race-blind advocacy group that seeks to overturn race-based admissions policies at colleges and universities across the country. He's a twice-published author, and he has spoken on CNN, Fox News, NPR, and he's written op-eds for the Wall Street Journal, USA Today, The Spectator, The Daily Mail, and Newsweek. Notably, Kenny was part of the effort that eventually led to the United States Supreme Court's ruling to strike down college affirmative action programs, and he is currently a candidate for the United States Congress from North Carolina's 13th District. We understand that many of us in the room today may disagree or otherwise feel strongly about what Kenny has to say, which is great. Constructive disagreement is a central element of our mission here today. However, if you'd like to voice your disagreement or otherwise have questions or comments for Kenny, we ask that you please hold those until the end of this presentation during the Q&A portion. Please also note that Davidson College does not officially endorse any political candidate, so Kenny's presentation this evening is by no means an institutional endorsement of his congressional campaign. It's simply an opportunity to freely engage with relevant perspectives on current events and issues. So with that in mind, without further ado, please welcome Kenny back to Davidson's campus.
Good evening, all. Nancy, it's so good to see you. And Rob and his legacy and his treasure will forever be blessed in the vision that's known as Davidson's Freedom of Thought and Discourse. I was a founding member and part of it and part of this effort, and because of him and because of Davidsonians' freedom of thought and discourse, we have this presentation here today, and we have the ideas that are able to be spread to everybody, regardless of their disagreement. And I know that that was in Rob's blood, and thank you for being here. Rick Santorum, and I promise you this is the first and last time that anyone will ever start a speech with Rick Santorum, said on The View 5 days ago after the Democrats won the municipal elections and state elections in a number of different states. He said on The View that sexy things like abortion and marijuana was what led the Democrats to victory on the ballot. And as a person who fought the Harvard discrimination case against Asian Americans, I'm deeply resonant, because on the list of sexy issues like abortion and marijuana, deciding who and who doesn't get rejected from college is probably low on the list. So why did I devote the first 4 years of my post-college life to fighting for rejected Asians who were discriminated from college admissions to make way for minorities of other races? It's because I believe, and I do believe this, it is because I believe in this value, colorblindness. And I think that this case and the Supreme Court case has a lesson to teach all of us, regardless if anybody is going to Harvard, regardless if anybody is going to UNC Medical School. The lesson in colorblindness needs to be taught for a merit-based society to everybody. But I acknowledge that it is a little bit of a hard situation to get around because you on this campus have been taught, and I would argue indoctrinated, with the CRT worldview. You know all the points, all the terminology. Systemic racism, institutional racism, implicit bias, privilege and oppression. How many of y'all don't know what these words mean? Exactly. And I'll tell you that I can tell you about these words when I first started learning them in your position as a college student on Davidson College's campus as a class of 2019 grad. When I first started learning these words, systemic racism, privilege and oppression, implicit bias, there was just a part of me, and I will tell you, it was just a feeling. There was just a part of me that felt off about the whole thing. And I couldn't articulate it for a long time. And I spent the early part of my career, the first 4 years of my life after Davidson College, trying, because I'm an author, and I try to figure things out linguistically, trying and attempting to articulate why this worldview and these terms felt so wrong to me. And I realized later on, perhaps only just recently, after fighting the Harvard case and winning, that I was being too logical about it. I was being too logical about this whole situation to the point of the heart of the matter was being lost. So let me explain it to you in this presentation, because I have a few more years of experience now, and I'm now 4 years out of this college. In this silo of the Marxist worldview that is privilege and oppression. I use the word Marxist intentionally, not as some right-wing talking point, because that is what Marxism defines in the currency of our college situation. Privilege and oppression is a Marxist term. It is the idea of dueling, dichotomous, black and white, red and blue categories in conflict with one another. That is a central philosophy that undergirds Marxism. And if you read the Communist Manifesto, you would know what I'm talking about. Do you remember, English majors out here, history majors here, do you remember what Marx's first line of the Communist Manifesto is? Anybody? Go ahead.
The history of all hitherto existing societies is the history of class struggles?
That's right. You're 100% right. The history of all hitherto existing societies is the history of class struggles. And what you have here is a repaired, reframed version of Marxism that substitutes race for class. It's just that simple. So the things that you're learning right now, it may be packaged as something new, but it's very old. But I'm not going to tell you that it's not a seductive philosophy. It is a seductive philosophy. That's why so many people believe in it. And I'm here today because I want to try something different. Something that would help reframe the debate over race that we have right now in a way that maybe could result in you changing your mind a little bit about what these terms mean. When my parents came to America from China in 1990 to study at Georgetown University, my dad for his PhD and my mom for her master's in accounting. Both of them were lonely. They had no social connections here. Scholarships from Georgetown didn't come with a built-in community. Dad was still practicing his English, and Mom served as a waitress to pay the student bills. They lived conservatively, frugally, often buying hard-boiled eggs as their lunch meal. So I'm not kidding when I was telling you I was literally raised in hard-boiled eggs. Then one day, they heard about this international fellowship hosted by this local Northern Virginia church called McLean Bible Church. And seeking friends, and honestly, seeking friends with hopefully Chinese Americans, they attended. And they found some Chinese Americans there. But the people that they met there that would make the most lasting impact on their life weren't Chinese. They found two people there who would change their lives forever. Their names were Barbara and Jack Tapping. The newly married couple was living in DC at the time, and they both developed an appreciation for international people from their time in public service. Barbara and Jack took mom and dad in and introduced them to church and took them and allowed them and went with them to explore DC and the cherry blossoms. They introduced them to their budding Christianity, a religion previously unknown to them. They became fast friends. Barbara and Jack constantly served, constantly gave, despite their lack of wealth, not just to me and my family, but to immigrants and to people of all color skins around them, and they were with me at my graduation ceremony from this college. How could I not feel grateful for them? How could I, when the notion that all white people are implicitly biased and hateful and secretly hateful against minorities, growing up in this kind of environment, and seeing these people in my life not resist the notion? Yeah, Barbara and Jack were privileged. But privilege, in this language of privilege and oppression, is not the best way to describe this transaction between Barbara and Jack and my family. And the language of CRT is incomplete in this specific case. To understand what happened between Barbara and Jack and my mom and dad and my family and me, we have to use a different schematic, a different frame of reference than CRT, which is only about conflict. What is that framework? How about kindness? I understand the desire to adjudicate our country's bad experience between white people and minorities, but there's plenty of good experience that me and many other minorities have had in this country, and it's great people that CRT does not capture. In essence, CRT is an incomplete theory. It does not tell the full story. It is a framework. But because I'm a math major, I can tell you, you test frameworks, and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. And in this case, it doesn't work. So what does the left do with these stories? I'll tell you what they do, and I'll tell you what they're doing to you right now in this college. They teach you to forget. They teach you, and especially the young minorities, they teach you to forget the kindness that you've had from this country and from the people around you, the reason why you're here, even though there's plenty to be grateful of. When I hear from professors and intellectuals that America is racist, that racism is normal, it really doesn't jive with my personal experience. And I know this for a fact, the personal experience of many minorities in America. But many minorities don't push back because they've been taught to forget. You've been taught to forget the good experiences that you've had with the people of this country. And you've been taught to focus on that. How about the 9.3% of private school graduates who are black, often on scholarship in this country, often coming from poor backgrounds and basically put into private school? Could you be cynical about it and say that it didn't give them the full experience that they could? Sure, but it sure the heck was better than the alternative. And that was because of generosity. How about the fact that more white women adopt black children than black women? What are we to make of this? Like, are white women like Andrew Jackson, like who adopted a Native American son on his way to putting the Native Americans in the Trail of Tears? Maybe. Or maybe, just maybe, they sincerely love everybody regardless of the color of their skin, and perhaps fell in love with their own child. Adoption comes with issues, but lack of care and the love of the parents is not one of them. How about the fact that 60% of black people feel that they're in better condition than their parents, according to recent polls? That's higher than white people. 60% of black people are in better financial shape than their parents. White people, it's lower than 50. So, would a racist country do that? Asian Americans like me have a lot to be grateful for. The first is that our country did not have to accept us. I think I should make that clear. Our country did not have to accept Asian Americans. It is a constitutional right of the federal government to dictate immigration policy, meaning if they wanted to eliminate the immigration process and accept 0 people from Asia tomorrow, they could do that. But they didn't. They accepted us. They accepted Asian Americans into this country, as well as many Latino Americans, and I think that we have the responsibility to accept this country in return. How's that? And these facts consider my own life story, and I realize the heart of the matter. And the heart of what I'm trying to save. Not just with this affirmative action case or my advocacy or my books, but everything that I do and the kind of character and the person that I want to be. And I want to recover a sense of gratitude for our country, modeled in the way that I treat others. Because I believe that the next battle right now in civil rights, now that affirmative action is done away with, is the battle between this attitude of gratitude for our country and critical race theory. This is the next battle. An attitude of gratitude versus the attitude that argues that we should focus on the continual harms of our country that is done against black people. This battle is being fought in 3 acts. The legal front. The stage has already been set by the dissenting opinions of Justices Ketanji Brown Jackson and Sonia Sotomayor in Students for Fair Admissions versus Harvard and UNC decisions. They read from Sotomayor. Our country has never been colorblind. Given the lengthy history of state-sponsored race-based preferences in America, to say that anyone is now victimized if a college considers whether that legacy of discrimination has unequally advantaged its applicants fails to acknowledge the well-documented intergenerational transmission of inequality that still plagues our citizenry. CRT. Direct from the Supreme Court. In the educational realm, second front. In your curricula, your public materials, and throughout the rest of your 20s, you're going to see the tension between gratitude and attitude erupt in your life. These words are now familiar to you. Legacy of discrimination, intergenerational transmission of inequality, these critical race theory terms are repeated to you over and over again by your DEI officers and now no less by your college president, Doug Hicks, in his latest email to you. And trust me, I got it. I read it. And then in the business realm, you're not out there yet, but you will be. And what is known as the DEIfication of business, you're going to encounter out there hiring quotas, promotion quotas for black people, promotion quotas for women, promotion quotas for LGBTQ people and anybody that identifies as LGBTQ. Using money as a weapon for social conformity, saying if we're going to promote you, you have to adopt our worldview. You have to post the black square. And when we tell you to jump, you better jump. Guys, this is what China is doing right now. In China, you can do business as long as you toe the party line. And the instant you don't, boom, you're disappeared. Look at Alibaba founder Jack Ma. Said something critical about the Chinese Communist Party, boom, disappeared for like 45 days, comes back, reforms Jack Ma, saying all of the party lines. And that's what we're becoming. But how do you counter this? How do you counter this? I do it. I'll tell you how I do it. I remember the goodness of my college. Davidson gave me a scholarship. At the time when I faced injustice in my college admissions process, Davidson recognized my potential. And make no mistakes, Dr. Hicks, and Dr. Quillen, the former president, if you're listening to this, I am grateful to Davidson for that experience. I am grateful to you for what you gave me. And I don't know about you, but saying I hate this and America is hateful and Davidson is hateful and Davidson comes from a legacy of hate, these tired words and these jargon just makes me sick. It just makes me sick. I don't know about you guys. I don't know how you guys stomach this bleated in your face over and over and over again. I guarantee if you're white, these words make you feel like trash, as they are intended to do. But less talked about is what these words do if you're a minority. I feel disempowered. I feel trapped. I feel like my life is not in my hands. When Doug Hicks writes that the leading benefactor, Marshall Chambers, was a slave owner and we're living on prosperity from his land, I feel anger. I feel angry about the position of my college. I don't feel good. I don't feel happy. I don't feel grateful. I feel the opposite of those things. Now, I understand why these words are said. I understand why he had to write that email. It's an expression of grief over the country we thought we knew. And yeah, maybe we had, over a period of years, and maybe due to Bush and because of 9/11, we have been given a rosy-eyed view of America. And maybe we've come to find out that it has not entirely lived up to our explanations. And we're sorry for it. And yeah, in stages of grief and lamentation, we express sorrow and sometimes repentance for our past behaviors. In triggering times, such as the time when we all saw Derek Chauvin lay his knee over George Floyd's neck, we express grief, and our language reflects that. But the point of grief and lamentation is, eventually, to get over it. The point is to, it's okay. The images aren't that important. The point is to remember the past, acknowledge it, and then leave it. That's what the point of grief is. When you grieve over your husband. Imagine if you're a woman and you're grieving over your husband for the rest of your life. What kind of life is that? You remember the past and then you leave it. But these grieving words about our country are being dragged on for years past the event, way past their expiration date. What these CRT messages are doing ultimately is to keep you suspended in a state of grief for longer than you need to be. Davidson College has now committed $100,000, your daddy's money, per annum to support research and teaching initiatives focused on the history of Davidson College and the ongoing inequality engendered by our nation's history of enslavement, racism, and other forms of identity-based discrimination. I mean, does anybody doubt what angle they're planning on taking this research? Will this be truly objective research? Or is there a clear determination to turn this study into a lens of wellspring of anger and resentment? You are going to be subjected to this verbal grieving for the rest of your life, or at least for your 20s. Americans have harmed black people, but they have also helped in many ways. Henry Ford hired the first African Americans to make the Model T, paying them an extraordinary, at the time, $5 a day. This American aristocrat practiced an equanimity in pay that inspired his subordinates and other CEOs of his time. It didn't matter your race, you would be paid $5 a day. If African Americans weren't getting equal opportunity during his day, it wasn't on Henry Ford's hands. That is colorblind treatment. That is a colorblind attitude of striving to create a fair workplace and culture. a just workplace in culture, which is we're going to pay you the same regardless of your race. Harriet Beecher Stowe wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin, which became the #1 best-selling book in America of all time, still today. You don't write the #1 best-selling book of all time in America and fail to impact people. In fiction, we read about Atticus Finch, who bravely fought against discrimination in his hometown. And there are many like him. There are many true stories of true Atticus Finches in our country. One, his name is Jimbo Perry. I know him, he's based out of Raleigh. He's a civil rights attorney. And he's helped many African Americans get the justice that they deserve. And then let's flip it over to the other side. There are many black Americans in this country who have sought a better route than endless grief about this very topic. Booker T. Washington wrote in Up From Slavery that he does not want his fellow black man to be jealous of the white man, because all that will inspire is victimhood and resentment and bitterness. Solomon Northup was enslaved for 12 years on a Louisiana plantation, not by his own accord. He was a free man, and then he became enslaved. And in his autobiography, 12 Years a Slave, he ends the autobiography by saying, I forgive those who wronged me. And he even notes, I may have a personally too optimistic view about this country, but I choose that. Because what use is the alternative? I would argue that many black Americans have grown up from endless grievance. Barack Obama inspired, he had charisma. Ben Carson had humility. I have no doubt that both of these people are good people. No doubt, even though I disagree with Obama's policies for their deleterious effects on our country and our current racial division. I have no doubt that they're good people. For goodness is not derived by one's skin color, but by one's approach, gentlemanliness, kindness, and peacefulness. And there's so much personal experience that I have of Americans helping, of lifting people up. I'm not denying the history that exists, but you can't change history. And suspending yourself in endless grief is unlikely to help you out. In fact, it's more likely than not to hurt you. Abandoning the gratitude that you have for this country may just be a recipe for your own personal disaster. And I do want to get back to this man, Henry Ford. Because Henry Ford, despite actually being fairly progressive in his treatment for African Americans, had serious flaws. He reserved his special antipathy in his later life for the Jewish people, one that stains his legacy. And we all have prejudice. You don't have to believe in the concept of implicit bias to understand what we have already known for millennia, which is that we are prejudiced human beings. And Henry Ford was prejudiced. But we now know what brought about this antipathy from Henry Ford. And I'll just say it like it is. I'll just tell you flat out, he had bad experiences with Jewish people. In his now released pamphlet, The International Jew, he calls out the bankers that he worked with. He calls out the bad loans that he was being given. He says that they are more focused on themselves than on helping America and American business. And perhaps in his special and individual cases, he was justified. But he translated that individual negative experience into an attack on all Jewish people, rather than daring to forgive the race for the individual negative experience. I know why there is so much anti-Semitism on college campuses. Listen to me, and listen to me frankly. I guarantee it that at least some of it has to do with bad experiences with Jewish people. It is a given fact that Jewish people are overrepresented in finance, politics, and other industries of real power and influence, and some of them, just like some of people of any race, will abuse their authority. just like people of any race, ethnicity, or religion, or no religion. And there are a segment of Americans and people in the United States that feel that they're victimized by this. But let me repeat to you right now, if you blame Judaism for your negative experience, you are being the opposite of colorblind. You are blaming groups for an individual's responsibility. And you are pushing values antithetical to those that I'm preaching to you today. I know this because, like some of you, I have been hurt by people of Jewish descent. I was bullied in high school by a Jewish person who laughed at me and taunted me for my Christian faith. And events like these protests trigger these bad memories in me. But when I slip, I remember some of my best friends. There's a man who I worked with on the Harvard case together. His name is Edward Bloom. He's a Jewish person. But we shared an affinity for preserving the colorblind values of this country. And he let me join the board of his organization, suing Harvard and UNC, a very prestigious board, a board of $25 million and 25,000 members. And I was 23 years old. And I called him about advice. I remember when I first decided that I wanted to run for Congress, I called him about advice to seek politics. And when other rich people turned me down, he gave. And just remember that there was an Orthodox Jew named Ross who was one of my best friends in high school. I miss him. We would spend time at each other's houses. I remember those experiences. I'm not saying that this is just limited to Jewish people. I'm saying this is about everybody. Whenever a white person or a Christian person or a Jewish person or an atheist harms you, cling onto these positive memories. Even if you don't have one. Even if you have to make it up. I'm dead serious. Don't slip. Because God only knows where that road goes. We all remember Dylan Roof's hateful and vengeful comments against black people during the Charleston church shooting, which killed 9 worshipers. He slipped. But now we have the leaked notes from Audrey Hale, the Nashville school shooter who shot and killed 6 school board members, including 3 children. This shooter goes on a rant about white people and how much they hate them. They slipped. It is clear that these shooters feel aggrieved by something, but they took it out on a whole set of innocent people. They became monsters, hateful human beings, because of an individual negative experience that they had with somebody of that descent. And I'm telling you right now, when you blame the word's problems on an identity group, it's a short ride to mania. You are creating a world where you are innocent, and it's the other side that carries all the problems. You forget the good and evil in each of us based on our individual choices. Race is but one aspect of who we are, and more important, far more important, and I hope Davidson teaches you this in their quest for liberal values, are our choices. Okay. Let's end with something brighter. Let's take it home. Let's take it home. Most of you don't know this person. Maybe some of you do. Maybe one of you do. But there was a woman at this college who was a debutante at Davidson. She was the leader in one of the Christian groups here. Half the guys, including me and my Bible group, had a crush on her. We all tried, but we all failed. But then here comes this man, and he was highly intelligent. He was an entrepreneurial spirit. He was the definition of a friend and a missionary. They met at a Christian group. He liked her first. She was resourceful. She said no, but he kept pursuing her, and eventually she allowed him to take her on a date. Now they're married. There's another story. She was 31 years old. She was a proud firearms owner and the leader of her house. She was wily, she was dressed right, she was petite, she was emotionally and spiritually mature. He was 6'3", he was dreamy and handsome by all objective standards, including mine. A fitness instructor with a six-pack, probably an eight-pack, honestly. They met, they fell in love, and they shared an affinity for Republican values and fitness. I'll tell you a third story. He was a 25-year-old computer programmer, a graduate of Davidson, and she wears the pants in the relationship. They both work for a large marketing venture firm based in the Carolinas, and she makes more money than him. But they met at the gym, and he rejected her, but eventually they fell in love, and they adopted a dog which they named Mochi. What's the linkage between all these three relationships? They were all interracial relationships. The first one, the debutante, was a white woman, and the man who picked her up was a black man. And the second was a black woman, and the man who picked her up was a white man, and they were both Republican. And the third is a Latino woman, and the man who picked her up is an Asian man. Yeah, the topic of race came up in these people's successful relationships. I've snooped in on some of these talks. I've helped to adjudicate some of the differences between these different cultures and different skin colors. But it was one topic. They had far more to talk about than just race. I get it that race matters in your life, but I just want to help you see it in a more truthful and perhaps less divisive way. I want this speech to help you and encourage you to see beyond that. Yes, we see race. Yes, we see people's different skin colors. It doesn't have to be all that we see. Because you will have to make that choice. You will have to make that choice. The world is making that apparent for you. You can look at the world like this, or you can look at the world like this. Gratitude or bitterness for this country. Thinking about people as individuals who make individual choices, or thinking about people as actors of their subsumed racial or ethnic category. Race is just one factor about who a person is, or race is the dominant factor about who a person is. Color blindness or critical race theory. You will have to choose a path of belief, because this world is pressuring you to conform to the critical race theory worldview, including this college. Do you choose to believe that ordinary Americans are generally good, generally rational, and open to being convinced? Or do you choose to believe that ordinary Americans are lodged with implicit bias and their judgments reflect mostly prejudice and irrationality rather than sensibility? Because I'm telling you right now, if you believe in the latter, don't run for politics. Because if you're in politics and you actually want to make a difference, you have to believe in people. And you have to believe that people are open to be convinced, no matter what side you are, Republican, Democrat. If you don't believe in the power of people to be persuaded, then don't run for politics. I'm not here to tell you that critical race theory doesn't have a point. I'm telling you that it's okay to believe. It's okay to have ideals that transcend skin color and group division. It's okay to aspire to be something that is beyond whatever the stereotype of your racial component or category is. That you don't have to be cynical of Martin Luther King when he said that I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Did he say that to say that it has already happened? Did he say that to say that there's not more to do? No. But he said that to inscribe an ideal into which he calls deeply rooted in the American dream. The ideal of colorblindness. The ideal of hope. The idea of hope. Read my lips. You don't have to subscribe to their ideology. You don't have to subscribe to their attitude. It will make you more depressed, bitter about something that you can't change. Invest in yourself. Invest in your country. This country is all you have, and it's a good one. Trust your friend. Stand on your own two shoulders. Thwart all the forces that threaten to send you to mediocrity and groupthink. Your head held high, and say, I have hope. I choose to love. I have hope. I choose to love. That's all you have. Thank you.
Probably got time for some questions if anyone's interested in asking Kenny anything.
Yeah.
This is just centered around, I guess, your candidacy now for the 13th district. What do you think are like the biggest issues for specifically the newly redrawn 13th district?
I think the main thing is that people in District 13 are tired of being condescended to. It is a largely rural and suburban district surrounding Raleigh. It's an R+8, but there's a heavy anti-elite strain in that district because they believe that politicians on both sides of the aisle are condescending to them, as in they think they know their problems, but they don't know their problems, and they patronize them. There are concerns about the economy, yes, but remember that not everybody wants to go to Davidson College and become a tech fund entrepreneur. You know, not everybody has. Some people really just want to remain planted and deeply rooted, and that's an okay way of life. And nobody should tell them that their way of life is less valuable. And yet we have DC here. You know, you have DC telling these people, you have to do this, you have to do that. I mean, COVID, I think, was probably the triggering point for a lot of these people, where basically it was the government saying, you have to wear a mask. To us educated people who bought into that whole thing, it was fine. Actually, it wasn't fine. A lot of people were depressed because of it, but you know, we believed that the authority was more right than wrong. These people believed that the authority was more wrong than right. And it turns out they were right, so. Yeah.
So I'm writing my capstone on censorship, big tech censorship of conservatives and just overall bias in the media. So I feel like that's one of the biggest things that's been dissuading me and potentially a lot of other people from going into politics, just because, you know, how are we even supposed to have a voice if it's completely monopolized by the left? So I was wondering what you thought about that.
Brave article, brave topic. I experienced big tech censorship when I was running Colorist United. We were trying to run ads on Facebook, and then one day, you know, we were doing it okay for a little while. It's okay, we really don't need this anymore. Okay, we really don't need this anymore. Okay, that's good. So I was running Colorist United, my nonprofit, and basically we were running ads. Just like any nonprofit can run ads on Facebook, and then suddenly one day we get this message saying, your ads have been blocked. And I said, why? You know, why are our ads blocked? They were very successful ads. They were actually going viral frequently. And somebody basically like stripped my account of the right to have ads. Somebody from San Francisco. And literally, I kid you not, I didn't know how to fix it, except for I had a Washington contact who knew somebody who worked at Facebook. And somehow I got in contact with this woman who was like the senior product manager at Facebook. And she happened to be like the person that Facebook hires to, I guess, appease conservatives. And I talked to this woman and I said, we have this problem. She said, oh, okay. You know, with her latte in her hand, and she said, yeah, we'll work on it, we'll look into it. And then the next day, boom, I got my page back, I got my ads back. And I'm pretty sure she just says that to anybody who comes up to her. But isn't that crazy? That somebody has to go through a Facebook rep just to get their ads unblocked and uncensored? Yeah, so if I'm in Congress, I would pass a law that says you have to give equal opportunity to ads. You have to give equal opportunity to businesses who want to promote one social agenda or another. Otherwise, you might as well just not promote any social agenda. So you have to have an equal opportunity law. I think that your thesis is hitting on the right point. If you want to talk to me about a story, I can talk to you about that. But it's a real problem. It's a real problem because people genuinely believe that they're better than you. They genuinely believe that they think higher and more authoritatively than you. I hope I didn't present myself in a way today that makes you think that I think higher and more authoritatively than you. But that is what some people believe, and we have to combat that.
So going back to the Doug Hicks emails, he sent one out after your Harvard decision was handed down, criticizing it, saying that it actually limits Davidson College and other institutions around the country's ability to fully evaluate applicants and create their ideal college community. So how would you respond to that sort of argument from these institutions, and what would your advice be for students at Davidson who are sort of left in the dark on things like that and things like the Maxwell Chambers email earlier this week until after all the decisions are made and everything's done, and we only hear about it in these short little emails that he and his team craft?
What about merit-based admissions prevents you from fully evaluating somebody? I mean, you're an academic institution, so primarily you should be evaluating people on academic merit. And it just so happens that Asian Americans score the highest out of all of the races on academic scores at Harvard.